Hey everyone, so it's 8. Let me kick off with some information around interpretation. Alia, could you go to slide 2, please?
I am not sharing at the moment, so I will be enabling my screen sharing shortly. Thank you. Just a reminder to join the language channel while we sort this out. And welcome to everyone joining.
So as Alia prepares her screen sharing, let me just let you all know, good morning, everyone, to start off. We want to let you know that interpretation services are available for this Zoom session in the following languages. We have English, French, Bahasa, and Vietnamese. Unfortunately, Zoom does not give us the Vietnamese language as an option in the backend, so we've put our Vietnamese interpreter in the Chinese channel. Please forgive us for this inconvenience, hoping that Zoom will include more Asian languages soon. To access the interpretation, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, the one that looks like a tiny globe, and select your preferred language. Thank you for joining us. If you have any issues, please let us know in the chat, and we'll look into it with the tech support. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous, bienvenue. Je pense, comme l'a dit Anna, c'est important pour ceux qui viennent de nous rejoindre. Vous pouvez activer les interprétations dans toutes les langues, que ce soit le français, l'anglais, le bahasa et bien sûr le canal chinois pour le vietnamien. Bienvenue encore une fois à cette conférence de presse organisée par 350 Africains et ses différents pays partenaires, en tout cas des pays récipiendaires du partenariat pour la transition énergétique juste, le JETP. Donc voilà, on projette pour l'interprétation en bas d'écran. N'oubliez pas de l'activer. Bienvenue à tous, que ce soit les acteurs des médias, les journalistes et les organisations de la société civile qui nous viennent un peu partout dans le monde. Je me présente, je m'appelle Ndeye Fatoussi, responsable des programmes à Lumière Synergie pour le développement au Sénégal. Donc, pour ce webinaire, nous avons 1 heure où vous aurez différentes sessions. En premier lieu, vous aurez Alia Keiti qui va revenir sur ce contexte d'élaboration des principes et comment ce processus initié par 350 Africains et ses différents pays partenaires a vu le jour et comment, en tout cas, le processus est poursuivi, et également de revenir dans le contexte de cette conférence de presse, dans le contexte du sommet du G7 et en quoi, en tout cas, quelles sont les aspirations et nos visions de manière globale pour ce qui s'agit de la transition énergétique juste et la position, en tout cas, des pays du Sud qui aspirent à une finance basée sur la justice. Ensuite, tout de suite après, vous aurez les différents représentants d'organisations de la société civile des pays récipiendaires du JETP qui vont eux aussi revenir sur leurs perspectives dans leur propre pays, dans leur contexte spécifique, mais également partager leur position par rapport à la finance climatique de manière générale et en quoi, en tout cas, quels sont les prérequis indispensables pour atteindre une transition énergétique juste. Vous aurez ensuite les questions et les réponses, bien sûr, qui sera modérée par Alia. Et ensuite, bien sûr, on va exposer quelles seront les prochaines étapes que nous comptons, en tout cas, entamer dans le cadre de ce processus entre les différentes organisations partenaires. Et ce sera présenté par Christian et Yang. Et enfin, nous pourrons clôturer avec Anna. Donc, encore une fois, bienvenue à tous, en espérant que les interprétations sont disponibles pour tout le monde. Et voilà. Donc, Alia, à toi.
Thank you, Fatou. And I hope everyone can see the screen and hear us clearly. Good morning and good afternoon. I would like to begin with a quote I heard from the former president of the Maldives, and it's something we often hear, but we are not in a climate finance gap, we are in a sinkhole. Thank you for joining us today for the public launch of the Fair Principles for a JETP from Recipient Countries, ahead of the G7 Leaders Summit later on this week. My name is Alia Kaji, and I am the Public Finance Campaigner at 350africa.org. The Just Energy Transition Partnership that was announced in South Africa, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Senegal was a watershed commitment. The JETP signaled the important role of financing in addressing climate change, and that our actions must be just and ensure that nobody is left behind. We must ensure that the transitions themselves also have resources. And halfway to COP29, we are here today to call on G7 leaders to pay up and show the necessary commitments to climate action through principled climate finance. Finance is not neutral. It can either enable our aspirations for transformed societies or refinance injustices in the name of going green. International financial architecture and its associated financial flows clearly illustrate power dynamics across the globe between developed and developing countries. It is these imbalances that we need to address in solidarity in order to shape just climate action that is people-centered. This is the year of finance, and it's clear that we need to see stronger commitments from the world's richest nations. It's just been announced that the climate goal of mobilizing $100 billion per year was met by developed countries. Whilst it was 2 years later than planned, the amount reached was about 15% higher than committed. However, research consistently shows that the poor quality of finance undermines the ability of developing countries to fairly and predictably plan for climate action. In some cases, the financing is even predatory and funds are channeled back to richer countries. In recent years, climate funding has been common in the form of loans, with interest rates or strings attached that benefit lending nations. This includes Japan, France, Germany, United States, or other wealthy nations that make up the G7, who play a critical role in influencing the international debate through setting ambitions. JETPs acknowledge that resources are needed to transform energy systems. They commit to mobilizing finance and supporting developing country access to finance. This is important because the financing cost of accessing finance for developing countries is more expensive than developed countries. But loans trap already indebted countries in vicious cycles. Debt payments limit the ability of developing nations to invest in climate solutions. Extreme weather causes severe economic losses, and often we need to borrow more. Those we are borrowing from also set the borrowing costs higher, so we are borrowing money to access more borrowed finance. Debt is not just an expensive red flag, but terms and conditions of financing often require macroeconomic changes in developing countries, liberalizing our economies and opening up to the market, cutting back on public spending. Austerity measures alongside increased debt servicing costs affect the most marginalized people, like women or the youth or indigenous groups the worst, those who are reliant on public service delivery. Earlier this year, the G7 climate and energy ministers agreed to phase out coal. Yet these nations are responsible for 27% of the global oil and gas production and nearly half of CO2 emissions from new oil and gas projects. G7 leaders, including donor countries of the JETP, must lead by example. Stop the financing of fossil fuels and false solutions and embark on just climate finance. We need strong commitments in the development of new, collective, and quantified goals that meet the needs of developed countries. As a collective from JETP recipient countries, our work is driven by how to embed those that are most severely impacted by the climate crisis in all stages of climate action. We assert that this includes financing. Regardless of what deal is top of the COP, the needs of developing countries remain the same whilst becoming more urgent. As civil society in developing countries, we affirm that the Global South has a vision of what we want our societies to look like and what financing should enable this aspiration. We call for a future where every aspect of the energy transition contributes to a profound and lasting change. Each of us, every community, should benefit from this change and create a justice-centered, more inclusive and resilient society. Collaboration and solidarity among civil society organizations across the globe is paramount in challenging the top-down direction of international finance. Through the development of these principles by recipient country civil society, by community-based organizations, we can use these principles to hold decision makers accountable. We can drive demands and build solidarity. These principles serve as a critical organizing tool that show local aspirations and prevent the hijacking of the energy transition agenda by powerful interests. In order to meet these needs that we have, finance must be transparent, it must be accountable, and it must be inclusive. All of this from the anchoring point of justice. Finance must work towards equitable power dynamics, and the type of financing must be led by economic, environmental, and social justice. Gender responsiveness and local leadership must guide how finance enables target setting and implementation and evaluation. This cannot be undermined by false solutions, but rather be grounded in human rights. We affirm that the leaders of the G7 must be principled and meet the needs of fair and just climate action by paying up climate finance for climate action and just transitions. We will share the link to our petition soon during this webinar. Next up, I would like to introduce our panel of speakers from recipient countries and reflections from across the globe. We will be presenting a Global South aspiration for principled finance. We will first have Brighton Fury from South Africa speaking, followed by Maureen Harris from the Vietnam Climate Defenders Coalition, Fatou Sal from Senegal, Ahmed Ashraf Berry from Trend Asia, and Andreas Sieber commenting from a global policy and campaigns perspective. Brighton, I'd like to hand over to you.
Morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Am I clear?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Can you just quickly enable my video?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay.
There we go.
Right. Thank you so much. Morning, everyone. It's great to be connected. Thank you so much, Aliyah. I think from our side, we are privileged to be part of this conversation. Firstly, we are aware that funding climate financing or finance from the Western countries has often resulted in communal polarization and sometimes marginalization as well. Some massive projects have caused gross human rights violations and extreme societal violence. Yes, the Global South is in urgent need of climate finance to transition towards renewables, but that funding cannot compromise the important values that we uphold as societies. We cannot accept any kind of financing. Financing should be connected to environmental, economic, and social issues that we face. It should fit perfectly to the context. Right now, as you were mentioning, the majority of countries in the Global South, they are in deep debt, and these deals are not ideal to this context. Hence, we reiterate that climate financing should suit
Brighton, you're on mute.
principles are inclusive to a variety of concerns that we have. concerning these deals. The principles also fit different contexts globally. The JETP deals have exhibited huge deficiencies in addressing some of these major issues that we have. For example, the issue of transparency, the issue of inclusivity, issues of accessibility of information. The civil society has often highlighted that we have struggles in accessing information that pertains to these deals. So our concerns are included in the principles that were drafted. There's been some cases of gross human rights abuses. We've had cases of civil war because of financing that has come to the global south. So in a nutshell, we cannot accept any kind of finance because we are in urgent need of funding. But that funding should be able to solve the problems that we have. It should always be able to connect to the problems that we have in the global south. Thank you so much, Aliyah. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you very much, Brighton. We'll head over to Maureen.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start by stating the obvious. I'm not from Vietnam, yet I'm on this panel to talk about the context in Vietnam and Vietnam's JETP. Vietnamese civil society were also not able, unfortunately, to participate in the process for developing the global principles that we're here to discuss today. And in Vietnam, the people that should be speaking on this issue are not able to speak. Vietnam's dedicated climate leaders, energy policy experts, community organisers, and others who have worked towards a just transition have been silenced. And this is at the heart of the question of a fair JETP. So over the past 3 years, authorities in Vietnam have imprisoned 6 prominent climate leaders on false charges. And they include Hoang Thi Minh Hong, the former director of Change Vietnam. Hong is a climate activist and a leader. And before it was closed down, Change Vietnam promoted public awareness and engaged policymakers on environmental and climate issues. And Hong has been wrongfully imprisoned since the 31st of May last year for tax evasion. Another is Dung Dinh Bach, an environmental lawyer and former director of the Center for Law and Policy of Sustainable Development. Bach supported communities affected by environmental harm and pollution to advocate for their rights. And he's now serving a 5-year sentence for tax evasion. And the 3rd anniversary of his arrest is later this month on the 24th of June. These arrests are part of a broader crackdown in Vietnam on independent civil society organizations working on environmental, climate, and energy issues. And the imprisoned climate leaders advocated on Vietnam's power development plans. They were vocal about concerns, including ongoing reliance on coal. Several were also active in helping secure Vietnam's commitment to net zero emissions by 2050, which helped pave the way for the JETP. Because of this reality, a group of environmental and human rights organizations formed the Vietnam Climate Defenders Coalition, of which I'm a part. And we're continuing to monitor Vietnam's energy transition from the outside and highlight the threats to climate leaders and restrictions on civic space and meaningful participation. And to that end, we've commissioned a new report to be published next week on the 17th of June, which is entitled The Missing Just in Vietnam's JETP. And the report explores the just aspect of the JETP in relation to 4 key areas: finance, governance, energy and technology, and civil society participation. And in each area, we've found that there are major gaps and challenges for the JETP to achieve its objectives and support an energy transition that's truly just and fair. As others have mentioned, for example, the majority of financing is offered at market rate loans rather than grants, putting forward a debt financing model of energy transition for the country. While governments and institutions involved in financing have obligations and policy commitments to human rights, public participation, and against reprisals, these are not reflected in the financing framework. Implementation plans don't include a concrete timeline for phasing out coal or specific commitments to retiring any coal plants. And rather than prioritizing rapid investment in Vietnam's vast potential for renewables, Energy plans include proposals to scale up carbon-intensive and environmentally destructive options, such as expanding natural gas imports and hydropower expansion. And the wrongful arrests have created a climate of fear and disabling conditions for participation in the JETP. Without people like Hong and Bark, this threatens not only the possibility for a just transition, but the success of the transition as a whole. Our report makes recommendations for action by G7 governments and other actors involved in the JETP, and they include immediate steps to ensure greater transparency and accountability and protections for environmental defenders and civil society. And they also include a call for clear principles on just transition for JETPs that are based on a participatory process and are also consistent with JETP partners and governments' human rights, labour and environmental obligations and their climate commitments. And the global principles we're discussing today are an important step in this direction as a cross-regional bottom-up set of demands that assert local aspirations for a just transition. They challenge the top-down direction of climate finance, which in Vietnam and elsewhere risks continuing business as usual rather than a successful and sustainable energy transition. We have embargoed copies of the report available today, and you can get in touch with the contacts on the slide to request a copy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maureen. We will be handing over to Fatou from Senegal. Fatou, are you able to come on?
Oui, merci Alia. Rebonjour à tous. Effectivement, pour le JETP du Sénégal, la caméra a été activée, je ne sais pas si tout le monde me voit. Donc, le JETP au Sénégal, je pense, est le plus récent de tous, mais il ne va pas être différent de ce que mes prédécesseurs ont eu à dire. Étant le plus récent, je pense, comme on l'a dit, l'un des principes incontournables dans le cadre d'une transition énergétique juste, en tout cas un processus qui veut être juste, c'est l'accès à l'information et la transparence. Malheureusement, au Sénégal, le JETP manque d'une déclaration politique forte, en l'occurrence, surtout et particulièrement à l'endroit des communautés qui vont accueillir les futurs projets énergétiques. Donc, comme on le sait, le JETP aujourd'hui, le Sénégal présente une spécificité comparée aux autres pays récipiendaires. On n'est pas une grande industrie charbonnière comme les autres. Donc, le concept de transition énergétique juste ne saurait concerner la protection des emplois ou en tout cas le fait de combler la perte des emplois issus de certaines industries, par exemple. Donc, le concept de juste s'adresse à qui dans le contexte sénégalais? Aujourd'hui, le Sénégal est un futur pays producteur de pétrole et de gaz. On le sait tous, le JETP propose, dans les propositions en tout cas, propose le gaz comme une énergie de transition. Sauf que, comme on le dit, c'est des projets offshore, en fait. Donc, c'est des communautés aujourd'hui qui s'activent dans la pêche et dans d'autres produits, en tout cas, dans d'autres activités de valorisation des produits halieutiques, dont les emplois aujourd'hui se trouvent menacés par ces projets-là. Donc, il est nécessaire, dans le cadre du processus que nous voulons entamer dans notre développement énergétique, etc., de s'assurer d'une utilisation responsable des ressources naturelles, mais de s'assurer également de la prise en compte des besoins et des attentes de ces communautés qui vont accueillir ces projets et de les inclure dans le processus. Aujourd'hui, ces communautés qui ne sont même pas au courant des accords internationaux pris par le Sénégal, que ce soit le JETP comme pour tout autre accord pris au sommet, qui ne puissent pas être au courant et connaître des partenariats comme le JETP aujourd'hui, pour nous, est une limite. Parce que ce que nous ne voulons pas, c'est que, comme on l'a dit, un processus de transition énergétique juste qui saura respecter les droits humains, les droits des communautés et qui sera inclusif et participatif pour ne pas justement commettre certaines erreurs qui ont eu à être partagées par mes prédécesseurs, ce qui n'est pas malheureusement le cas. Donc, le concept de juste manque de concrétisation n'est pas forcément compris et concrétisé aux besoins et aux attentes des communautés, comme je l'ai dit, particulièrement celles qui vont accueillir les projets d'énergie, mais aussi celles qui sont précédemment affectées par les projets d'énergie fossile ou même au contexte du changement climatique. L'autre problème également avec le JETP du Sénégal est que pour nous, comme je l'ai dit, qui pose problème, c'est un processus basé sur les fausses solutions. Et Ça rejoint également le manque d'inclusion et de participation des communautés parce que tout ce qui se choisit au sommet, très souvent, se fait malheureusement au détriment des réels besoins et réelles attentes des communautés. Donc, les partenariats, on ne cessera de le répéter, liés au financement climatique ou à la transition énergétique juste, doivent être guidés par des principes de justice et de respect des droits humains, mais aussi de s'assurer à garantir que les projets bénéficient réellement aux populations locales et ne créent pas de nouvelles inégalités. Et je pense que c'est tout l'enjeu qui se pose aujourd'hui au Sénégal. Donc, à l'exemple également de mes prédécesseurs, aujourd'hui au Sénégal, mis à part ces projets d'énergie, de gaz et de pétrole offshore, d'autres communautés, même s'il n'y en a pas beaucoup également, ont été frappés et impactés par des projets problématiques d'énergie. Sur cette photo, on a l'exemple de la centrale à charbon de Senegal. Aujourd'hui, il est proposé que toutes ces centrales-là soient converties en centrales à gaz. Pourtant, la localisation de ces projets pose problème, les impacts environnementaux posent problème, et pourtant, ces communautés qui sont affectées par ces projets et même peut-être les perspectives qui sont proposées dans le cadre de ces infrastructures-là, ils ne sont au courant d'aucune information, que ce soit dans le cadre du JETP comme la politique de transition énergétique du gouvernement sénégalais de manière générale. Donc, à l'image aujourd'hui des autres rencontres internationales qui ont montré leurs limites, les COP, etc., les G7 en tant qu'acteurs et parties prenantes à l'échelle mondiale importante en termes de prise de décision et de guide et d'orientation, en tout cas des finances climatiques liées au climat aujourd'hui, devraient revoir leur position. Mais aussi, je rejoins mes prédécesseurs sur le fait que, pour une préoccupation en termes de justice climatique, il serait inconcevable qu'aujourd'hui les JETP puissent contribuer à aggraver la dette climatique. Donc, les fonds qui sont attribués ne sauraient être sous forme de dette ou ne sauraient en tout cas aggraver la position vulnérable déjà qu'ont nos pays. Donc, on devrait revoir le format qui est attribué aujourd'hui dans le fonds donné dans le cadre des JETP. Parce que la transition énergétique, encore une fois, juste, en tout cas, il ne s'agit pas seulement d'offrir des solutions ou en tout cas des semblants de solutions qui visent à passer de telles manières de produire, etc. C'est tout un système qui doit être revu, c'est tout un système qui doit être changé pour réellement parvenir à un processus qui profite à tous et qui est qui peut être bénéfique à tout le monde. Merci.
Thank you very much, Fatou. I will now hand over to Ashraf. Just resharing so we see the correct slides. Ashraf, are you able to join?
Yes, I'm here. My slide is in the...
Excellent, thank you. Just share. Okay, we'll try and get that going, but please do continue.
Ya, terima kasih atas kesempatan hari ini. Saya dari Trend Asia Indonesia ingin memaparkan aspirasi koalisi di Indonesia atas pendanaan transisi yang berkeadilan. Jadi pertama sebelum JETP diumumkan di Indonesia kami menyusun prinsip dan nilai tentang apa itu transisi energi yang berkeadilan. Koalisi yang kami tergabung di dalam yaitu Koalisi Bersihkan Indonesia. Ada beberapa nilai dan prinsip yang kami set pada waktu itu dan kami luncurkan. Yang pertama adalah bahwa pendanaan untuk transisi haruslah akuntabel, transparan, dan partisipatori. Kemudian berikutnya dia harus melakukan penghormatan, kemudian pemenuhan dan juga perlindungan terhadap hak asasi manusia. Kemudian bahwa dia harus memastikan keadilan ekologi, dia harus memastikan keadilan ekonomi, dan bahwa dia haruslah transformatif. Dalam hal ini harus membawa Indonesia keluar dari ekonomi yang sangat bergantung pada ekonomi yang ekstraktif. Beberapa langkah strategis yang kami sarankan, yang kami serukan, yaitu pertama akselerasi dari penutupan PLTU batubara dan juga tambang batubara. Kemudian bahwa dia harus meninggalkan transisi energi atau solusi-solusi palsu dari transisi energi. Seperti diketahui sekarang Indonesia mendorong gas, bahkan nuklir dan juga co-firing. dalam hal transisi untuk transisi energi. Kemudian bahwa Indonesia harus melakukan reformasi kebijakan energi dan juga reformasi atas tata kelola PLN atau perusahaan listrik negara, dan bahwa untuk implementasi dari transisi energi haruslah berkelanjutan, berkesinambungan, tapi juga titik tekannya adalah bahwa dia harus prosesnya bottom up. Next. Beberapa hal yang harus diperhatikan oleh negara-negara G7, terutama bahwa konteks transisi energi Indonesia sangatlah vulnerable, sangatlah rentan. Yang pertama, political corruption dan conflict of interest begitu besar sehingga regulasi banyak tercapture atau regulatory capture terjadi. Kemudian kondisi demokrasi yang semakin sempit, kemudian sentralisasi yang ekstrim, kemudian juga terjadi penurunan standar-standar perlindungan lingkungan dan buruh, dan kemudian juga jumlah masyarakat yang rentan, baik itu karena krisis iklim ataupun karena kondisi ekonomi semakin besar. Inilah konteks penting yang harus diperhatikan oleh para pendana, utamanya G7 dalam konteks pendanaan untuk transisi. Berikutnya, next. Next slide. Beberapa hal juga kami menemukan beberapa masalah prosedural yang berkaitan dengan partisipasi publik yang bermakna. Oleh karena itu, partisipasi publik yang bermakna haruslah dimungkinkan, kemudian digunakan juga bahasa dalam konteks agar masyarakat luas di Indonesia bisa memahami. Kemudian ada masalah konsultasi juga yang tidak berkualitas, dan kemudian masalah representasi. Next. Beberapa hal penting juga yang menjadi aspirasi kami. Yang pertama, ini sangat penting mengenai access rights di Indonesia. Jadi karena peraturan yang tercapture atau regulatory capture, bahkan untuk pengadaan tanah sekalipun pemerintah mempunyai secara legal dapat menggusur, begitu ya, dapat menggusur masyarakat, dapat merubah tata ruang seenaknya demi kepentingan umum atau apa yang mereka namakan kepentingan umum. Ini sangat penting karena pendanaan dapat saja terlibat dengan penggusuran. Kemudian information gaps juga terjadi, climate ambition-nya masih rendah, kemudian hal yang paling penting juga excess supply terjadi dan tidak ada jaminan bahwa itu dapat dihindari. Ini juga akan sangat berkaitan dengan pendanaan JETP yang saat ini sangat heavy dengan utang gitu ya dibandingkan dengan grants, dan ini tidak sesuai dengan atau tidak selaras dengan semangat Polluters Pay Principle dan tanggung jawab historis dari negara-negara G7. Kemudian tidak ada juga policy yang cukup atau investment proposal yang cukup yang dapat memastikan bahwa peta jalan untuk penutupan PLTU dapat terjadi sesuai dengan target. Lagi-lagi kami beraspirasi juga bahwa solusi-solusi palsu tidak digunakan dalam transisi atau tidak dinanai untuk transisi. Dan yang terakhir adalah demokratisasi energi agar solusi-solusi berbasis komunitas juga mendapat tempat. Sekian dari aspirasi dari kami di Indonesia. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Asal. Next, we'll have a global reflection from Andreas. Andreas, are you able to join?
Thanks very much. Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. I'm Andreas. I work in the global team of 350, and I just wanted to say first, I'm quite humbled by listening to all of you, and I think in these global processes, really, communities far too often, and then kind of the on-the-ground voice far too often do not get the voice they deserve and they should have, and this is unfortunately then reflected in the outcomes. So here, some context for climate finance discussions are at globally, and particularly looking towards the G7 Leader Summit at the end of this week, what could be some concrete demands. So to put this into just some context, if we look at the numbers of the, sorry, could you go back to the previous slide? Thanks. If we look at the global context, just to like how much money is actually needed, the best estimate we have is around 1.9 trillion per year in investment in the global south outside of China. And this is exactly where we face a lot of the challenges for the energy transition to take place, both at the speed as well as in a socially just way. And that is, I think, an important bit. Around about 2/5 of this is expected to come from public sources, and this is where we will have a huge gap. And so support will need to center public sources. And I think also for JETPs, it is true that there's a bit of too much or far too much reliance on private finance in many cases. Now, if we kind of look at the investment needs and then go to support needs, we see that there's around 1 trillion needed in total per year by 2030. That includes also crucial elements like adapting to climate change, and addressing loss and damage. But around 200 billion per year are needed in support for the energy transition. And that is grant equivalent. So not only that you give a loan and say, okay, I have given a loan from which I, as a rich country, profit, but the grant equivalent, so the actual money that is not transferred to make money from it, but that is given as support. I'm sure it'll be 200 billion a year to make the energy transition in these countries globally both 1.5 aligned, so aligned with the Paris Agreement, as well as socially just. So we also need money to support people who are, for instance, laid off and need to be retrained in the coal sector or in other sectors. This week, the leaders of the G7 meet, and it's critical that they provide an answer on climate finance, namely on JETPs, but also on the so-called new collective quantified goal, the new finance goal that was also mentioned earlier. And if I now go to the summit on the next slide, just briefly what we think the G7 must do. First, they just must recognize the need to provide climate finance, right? And the scale of it. They haven't done so. They have spoken of investment need, but they have not recognized support needs. And then they must commit to a fair and ambitious, well, says, well, that's the new finance goal. It's a not particularly beautiful acronym, the NCQG, the new collective quantified goal, at COP29 at the climate conference this year, with sub-goals for mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. They should also reform the MDB system crucially. That includes principles of fairness and not further indebting countries and communities, but it also includes to scale up the overall quantum, the overall amount of money, and tripling it by 2030. They should also support additional and new sources of financing, because also in the global north, additional public money is scarce. So we need to talk about taxing the fossil fuel industry, taxing the most wealthy, taxing air travel levies on shipping. These discussions are becoming part of the debate, and we have some momentum, and the G7 should provide clearly some further momentum in recognizing the need for these. And finally, I think that the G7 at the leaders level should also recognize that a lot of things with the JETPs have not gone the right way. And I think the principles that all the previous speakers laid out should be, clearly taken up by the leaders. On the one hand for JETPs, but I think a lot of what you said also applies to the climate finance landscape more broadly, and can serve there as a kind of guiding star for the debate. Thanks very, very much. Looking forward to questions and discussions. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andreas. We will now go to 15 minutes of a Q&A. We would like to hear from members of the media for this press conference and also participants of the call. I am looking through the Q&A in the box. I see we have some questions that will be answered live. If you would like a particular presenter to answer your question, please indicate so. I will respond to one of the questions that I see in the Q&A. It says anonymous, but the question is, in the context of shrinking national civic space, what is the role of international civil society in influencing these JETPs? As has been mentioned by the speakers, every country has a different process, it appears, when including the public in the JETP processes. From a South African perspective, we have engaged as members of civil society by engaging the decision makers directly or stakeholders involved in the JETP with questions in particular about the JETP. Similar to Indonesia, we have questions on the various investment plans or implementation plans that have been designed around the JETPs as soon as these have become publicly available. So we have engaged through the consultation and commenting phases, but we have also sent numerous requests to various decision makers in the process to request meetings, to request consultations, and to request more mechanisms for civil society participation. I will now look to other questions. I see Fatu has indicated she will answer a question from Maurice. Fatu, would you like to respond to Maurice's question? Why is climate financing being treated as a loan and not a grant? Advocacy should focus here and move from taking actions, from talking to actions and implementation. Fatu, would you like to answer this one?
Oui, merci Alia. Effectivement, à la question de Maurice, je voulais juste lui préciser qu'on était sur la même longueur d'onde. Je pense que même dans le document de principe que nous avons élaboré, on l'avait dit. Il faut privilégier les subventions au lieu de dettes, comme je l'avais dit tout à l'heure derrière dans mon intervention, pour une préoccupation également de justice climatique. Si on cherche des solutions au changement climatique, il est évident que ceux qui ont été les plus impactés, etc., doivent être il ne doit pas y avoir en tout cas des pesanteurs nouvelles sur leur économie, etc. Donc, le JETP ne saurait être une solution s'ils aggravent la dette des pays qui vont en bénéficier. Je pense que même ça rejoint notre principe sur la justice climatique et il y a tout un paragraphe sur ça qui concerne la dette et un plaidoyer par rapport à ça. Donc, ce qui est d'ailleurs dommage dans les JETP, c'est que dans les déclarations politiques, en tout cas pour le Sénégal, on ne dit pas clairement, il n'est pas précisé quelle part est sous forme de dette et quelle part est sous forme de subvention. On dit juste une telle subvention initiale de montant de 2,5 milliards, etc., qui sera sous forme de dette, de subvention, etc. Donc là, il y a un caractère flou déjà de l'information pour moi qui est une limite, en tout cas dans les JETP, et qu'il serait nécessaire en tout cas de revoir. Donc je voulais juste rejoindre Maurice par rapport à ce qu'il a dit.
Thank you, Fatu and Maurice. I hope that answers your question. I see several questions regarding community participation and community representation in the JETP process as well as this conversation. Would any of the panelists like to answer this question? Okay. Feel free to come off mute. Maybe Ashok, maybe Brighton.
Hi, Alia. Yeah, maybe I could answer that. Alia? Okay, so in bahasa, I'm sorry. Di Indonesia misalnya saat ini peraturan yang ada di Indonesia justru menjauhkan partisipasi masyarakat, terutama masyarakat yang tidak terdampak langsung dari proyek energi. Perubahan itu dilakukan juga seiring dengan penurunan akses demokrasi gitu ya, atau situasi demokrasi di Indonesia. Tentu sedari awal masyarakat perlu dilibatkan secara prosedur. Sedari awal, maksudnya sedari awal proyek akan didirikan gitu ya, harus ada akses masyarakat, baik itu yang terdampak langsung ataupun tidak, untuk terlibat, harus dipulihkan akses terhadap partisipasi itu, tapi kemudian juga bagi masyarakat yang terdampak dari proyek-proyek fosil, hak atas pemulihan juga harus diberikan. Jadi bukan hanya soal energi apa yang akan diberikan, tapi juga untuk beragam energi, hak berpartisipasi harus harus diberikan begitu ya. Dan tentu terkait representasi, baik itu masyarakat yang terdampak secara langsung, tidak langsung, termasuk masyarakat pekerja atau buruh juga perlu dilibatkan, semenjak transisi ini juga sedikit banyak akan mempengaruhi mereka gitu ya. Jadi partisipasi sedari awal yang bermakna harus diberikan kepada masyarakat, dan secara presentasi baik yang terdampak langsung atau tidak harus dilibatkan, termasuk dari masyarakat yang termarginalkan selama ini secara banyak hal begitu ya, harus dilibatkan. Kurang lebih begitu, Alia.
Excellent. Thank you, Ashraf. Anything else to add, Brighton? There were several questions, so just asking a few panelists. Thanks. Okay. If Brighton is not able to answer here, I would like to go to Maureen. I think is it Vietnam? Yes, there's a question about Vietnam. What will the global solution in a strategic approach to eliminate the poly? Louise, would you like to unmute and ask the question? I'm not sure I understand it correctly. Okay, maybe we can come back to that. The next question I see, or maybe Maureen, you could type the answer in the chat if you do understand some of the question. The next question I see by Justice Mpeti: what steps are being taken to ensure that the environmental energy benefits of renewable energy projects are equally distributed among all communities, especially those historically affected by pollution? I can answer from the South African perspective here. One of the essential principles in the South African just energy transition is the principle of distributive justice. And so the adopted framework of the just energy transition, the just energy transition framework, which is an adopted document for the just transition and considered in the just energy transition plan, implementation plan, specifically addresses pollution affected communities. However, this may not directly be considered in the environmental benefits of renewable energy projects. However, in the implementation of the JETP projects that are considered to be JETP projects are going to be assessed for their environmental benefits as well as their social benefits and as well as their geographic location. I will also try and type an answer here, but I just want to move to the next question. Apart from fossil fuel, which other industries are accounted for finance required under JETP? I want to hand over to Fatu. I'm not sure there. I think one of the challenges in terms of other industries is that it may be industries such as green hydrogen or electric vehicles such as South Africa, but it could also be false solutions like we see in other countries such as gas. Fatu, would you like to respond to this in terms of industry?
Oui, Alia, vous m'entendez? Je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez.
Oui.
Ok.
Yes.
Ah, c'est bon. Effectivement, concernant comment est-ce que, en tout cas, les avantages et les bénéfices vont être distribués, particulièrement pour les communautés affectées par les énergies fossiles, en tout cas, le processus n'est pas bien défini. Pour le cas du Sénégal, je donne juste un exemple. Tout à l'heure dans ma présentation, je l'avais mentionné. La plupart des communautés aujourd'hui, le principal problème, c'est-à-dire que le discours politique, en tout cas public, est accentué sur les avantages économiques. On parle de retombées financières, etc., qui peuvent, en tout cas, bénéficier à l'économie du Sénégal de manière générale. Mais, et on parle également d'accès universel à l'énergie comme un aspect aujourd'hui qui va contribuer à plus de justice et d'accès aux services sociaux de base pour les communautés. Sauf que ces projets, comme je l'ai dit, seront menés en offshore. Donc, les activités génératrices de revenus de milliers de communautés sur le long des côtes sénégalaises est aujourd'hui menacée. Bien évidemment, ce sont ces communautés-là et ces cibles qui doivent être mises en avant et privilégiées quand on parle de retombées. Parce que non seulement ils sont exposés aux impacts du changement climatique, par exemple, le Sénégal est fortement frappé par l'érosion côtière, donc c'est des communautés qui sont déjà vulnérables au changement climatique. Donc, quand on parle de processus qui visent à apporter des solutions à ce phénomène, ils devraient être mis en avant, d'autant plus qu'ils risquent aussi, qu'ils sont encore exposés aux impacts de ces activités d'exploitation ou de projets, en tout cas, et dont certains même sont proposés comme des projets de transition dans le cadre du JETP, en tout cas, et qui sont directement liés au processus. Donc, ces avantages-là ne pourraient être le meilleur moyen de définir comment ces avantages-là seront partagés, c'est que ces communautés soient déjà incluses dans le processus, puissent avoir accès aux informations, partager des cadres de concertation multi-acteurs avec le gouvernement, les sociétés exploitantes également, mais même dans la définition des projets, il faudrait que ces communautés-là puissent s'y retrouver, se sentir inclus, etc., etc. C'est ça le premier avantage, avant même d'en venir aux bénéfices, parce que s'ils ne sont pas inclus dans le processus, bien sûr que leurs besoins et leurs attentes sont oubliés dès le début. Donc, tout doit se faire en amont, en tout cas pour que ces avantages-là puissent être bénéfiques à tout le monde.
Thank you very much, Fatu. The next question I see is South Africa specific. I will try to answer the remaining questions on the chat because I would like to hand over to our colleagues in the principles, Christian and Liangi, who will be talking through some of the remaining steps.
Yes, thank you, Alia. I will start and then Liangi will come next. And I would like to start with a quote from one of our op-eds that we wrote on this topic. And it said, the Just Energy Transition Partnership must recognize that true justice lies in ensuring that the most impacted communities benefit from the transition, and this can only be achieved through people-centered renewable energy solution. Yeah, and talking to our next steps, our partners in the recipient countries will spread that message and our demands through various planned activities at the country level. I would like to start with what we did last year. In November 2023, we had an in-person meeting of civil society organization in Dakar, in Senegal, to start engaging with partners in Senegal and to share learnings from South Africa and Indonesia. As Senegal was the last on the list of countries that get a JETP. Outposts include a blog and video that people can see online. We post online a blog and video. In November this year, the 4th of November 2024, we gathered online approximately 80 CSOs, members and partners from the recipient countries to reflect on the process of drafting these principles and to get feedback from them. And from that meeting that we had online, the CSOs, members and partners gave us the go ahead to move forward, and they shared some next steps on how they are going to use the Global JETP principle in their work, in the lobbying and work, advocacy work at country levels. This includes popularizing the principle and regular engagement to ensure relevance. In South Africa, for instance, what we heard from our partners, the core working group and the other partners, they want to use the Global JETP principle in community mobilization and CSO and partners engagement on JETP. And our JETP core groups member from Senegal are also working on a plan. Let's say in South Africa, the global JETP principle can be used as a lobbying and capacity building tool to make finance relatable and increase the demand and pressure on development finance institutions and public finance institutions that are inclusive and support socially owned renewable energy. In Senegal, as I said, our partners and civil society organization members are working on a 6-month plan to use the Global JETP Principles in the community mobilization and CSO and partners engagement work on JETP. We have in this meeting, Fatou, she's one of our partners in Senegal as well, with her organization, LSD and Action Solidaire International. They are part of the CSO coalition in Senegal, with some international partner as well. They have a 6-month plan to organize various meetings with CSOs to present the principle and engage communities in some work in the Salom Delta, which is a gas and oil projects region. And they are also planning some activities, community mobilization activities in Sandu. Sandu is where the government of Senegal have decided to build a coal power plant. And we have a very good partners and community members there who are fighting against that project and are calling for more just energy transition. And they are going to use the principle as well. Yeah, let me stop there. One of the things that we are also planning is a CSO change with our colleagues, our partners in Indonesia. And this will also come late this year in September. I will now pass it on to Liangi for the plan in Indonesia, Vietnam. Thank you. Liangi?
Thank you, Christian. This is Liangi with the 350 Asia team. So as the Marine mentioned earlier, that on the 31st of May marked the first year anniversary for Hong, our beloved colleague. So we are continually asking the international partners group to advocacy for the JETP process to include the principle of just. And then on the 17th of June, that we will launch our Vietnam JETP reports. And upcoming in September, as we're also planning some actions. But also we are sending love and stand solidarity for those countries who are having shrinking civil society spaces. We're inviting people to write your own words to Hong and to drop your lovely notes. I will drop the message here if you want to obtain the Vietnam JETP reports and also follow up with us. And I want to use our beloved colleague's quotes here that she said, there's no planet B, so everything we do create an impact, big or small. There's only planets that we have for this one. So thank you for joining today, and I hope you to continue to engage with us.
Great, I will take it on. Thank you, as Liangi said, for joining us today. As we conclude, we want to make sure that you have all the resources needed to further explore and share the principles we've discussed. Please find in the chat the link to our media kit. In it, you'll find the official press release that will be distributed, the principles in English, French, and Bahasa, and the speakers' biographies. In the information sheet that is there, you'll find useful links, our JETP website, which offers detailed information on the JETPs, including principles, ongoing projects, and country-specific details. We highly value your feedback, so please participate in the principles survey that is linked as well to help refine our approach. For any inquiries or further information, my contact details are available, and you can find information about our panelists in their bios, as I mentioned before, to arrange interviews and discussions. Lastly, we have the JETP Justice mailing list that will keep you updated with the latest developments, news, and insights around the work that's being done. So please sign up through our website or reach out to me, Anna Amar, if you like. All these materials are accessible through the link provided here today. Looking ahead, there are several significant global events leading up to COP29. Please stay tuned as we mobilize around these moments. A new 350 campaign aligned with our demands will soon launch to urge financiers and governments to prioritize and increase investments in affordable and clean energy, particularly for communities at the forefront of the crisis in Africa. So get ready for this. You'll hear from us very soon. Till then, onwards and upwards. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.